Whee! So can you all see me and hear me? All right, good. Well, I'm very happy to be here this morning, and I'm really happy to feel the love energy that we have created here today, because the title of my talk today is Love Thy Neighbor. And I want to share with you that when I first heard of this talk title, and I got this title. So in Centers for Spiritual Living, we have this thing called Global Themes, and they're a set of 52 talk titles, complete with all kinds of yummy stuff, outlines and quotes and suggestions for research and books of the month. And so the topic for the whole month of September is Loving Out Loud. The topic for this week is Love Thy Neighbor. So I looked at that topic and I went, well, I don't need to talk about that. I love everybody unconditionally. And then I got to thinking about it and went, maybe not so much. Maybe I do need to do this talk. So I'm doing the talk. And I sat down, I started this talk a couple of weeks ago. I fleshed it out. What came out was a little surprising to me. You know, when I'm preparing these talks, I get in a state of openness so things can download. And then I started reading the book of the month, which is this book by a lady named Bell Hooks. And then I started reading another book and things started downloading. And I went, this is all really interesting stuff. So I'm getting this talk put together here. So I don't know about you guys, but I don't love everybody unconditionally. I just don't. There's people in this world that I hear or see, and it's more difficult. And yet, I know that in there somewhere is a lesson for me. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I want to talk about what loving unconditionally looks like and present some questions for you. So what would it mean to love out loud? That's the topic for the whole month for me. What would it mean for me to actually love out loud? Now I'm going to tell on myself here. So I've decided to start dating again. And I'm meeting people. And I'm loving out loud. At least I'm trying to. And it's quite interesting. Okay, Karen, you're loving out loud. You've made a promise to yourself. You've made a commitment to love out loud. What does that look like? And so it's just been a real interesting adventure. What does that mean for us to love out loud? It's different for all of us, I'm sure. How do I love people that don't support the same things that I support? How do I love people that seem to care more about money than things like compassion? I mean, this kind of stuff, these are the questions that come out for me and up for me when I contemplate this kind of stuff. And you might be able to see why I wanted to bypass this topic and not talk about it today and do something different. But I knew it was up for me. And maybe it's up for you too. Maybe you too have been having some issues loving unconditionally, loving your neighbor. You might even be asking, why should I even try to love unconditionally? And so one of the books that I was reading, not necessarily as research for this talk, but there's a whole chapter on love in this book. This book is called Revelations on the River. It's by a man named Matthew Dowd, and I am loving this book. He suggests that love is not a goal for us, it's a way. And that changed everything for me. Love is a way of being. It's not a goal. Love is a way for me to live successfully. When I be love, not do love, not feel love, but be love, it changes things for me. It changes the perspective. It changes how I show up in the world. So love is a goal, not a way. And if I make that, if we make that love as a goal for ourselves, if we make our love as a way for ourselves, not a goal. In other words, if we show up as love, and, we talk about God a lot around here, and we talk about attributes of spirit. And I think the one we talk about more than any other is love. And you've got it in your mission or your vision or in one of your readings here about showing up as a manifestation of spirit. That's love as the way. We show up as a manifestation of spirit. We show up as love. So then it becomes, how do I do that? How do I show up in the world as love? And so it's not so much about loving my neighbor. That's kind of a nice little benefit, an end result of me having love be my way. It's my way of being in the world. And so some of that stuff begins to happen naturally and automatically when we do that. I think that a refusal to even look at this kind of stuff is sort of a self-limiting prophecy. I mean, we look at how we do life and I'm not going to love that person and I'm not going to love that person, definitely not that one. And how much of that is coming back and reflecting back on us? So we limit ourselves when we look at this stuff and say, I'm not going to do that. So I'd like to take a deep dive and invite you all to take a deep dive into what being love looks like and what being love feels like. And when I started to do that, I started to feel some shifts within me. And I love it when that happens. I really do. I love it when those inner shifts begin to happen. There's another book that I was reading. This one I mentioned earlier by a lady named Bell Hooks, and it's called All About Love, New Visions. And she too says that if we are to successfully answer the call to love our neighbor, we have to identify what love looks like. So here's what she says. Here's another challenge for me. I don't know about you, but for me, it's a challenge. She says, to truly love, we must learn to mix various ingredients. Here's her ingredients. Some of these I can hang with, some of them not so much. Care, affection, recognition, respect, commitment, and trust, as well as honest and open communication. Now, I can hang with care and affection and recognition and commitment and honest and open communication. Those are all things on my list of things to do. But respect and trust, they don't come automatically. I don't respect everybody automatically, nor do I trust them. I trust people to sometimes to behave in ways that I don't appreciate because they've shown me. I don't trust automatically. I don't respect automatically. I think those things are earned. And so now I'm looking at my beliefs about respect and trust and how I can show up as love and be love and have an element of respect and trust in there and still have boundaries. And I looked at how I was loving some of my neighbors. I live in a very conservative area out near Topaz Lake. It's rural Nevada, guys. It's cowboy country out there. I love it. But there are certain aspects of it that are challenging for me. And I was looking at how I was loving some of my neighbors, and I had no respect for them. Turns out there's a lot that needs to happen in order for me to say I respect someone. And trust, well, I trust myself. I trust God. I trust my partnership with God, my oneness with God. I trust certain people in my life. I could probably count them on one hand. There's people in this world I trust implicitly. Not very many of them. And then there's what I call negative trust. I trust people to behave in certain ways. Yeah, you get it. I know you get it. Yeah, I trust people to behave in certain ways that I don't appreciate. And so I set boundaries. I stay away from those people. I trust them to be and do exactly who and what they are. And I don't want any part of it. So how do I love them unconditionally? How do I love my neighbor? Because we are being called to do so here. We're being called to do so. And if we don't love our neighbors, I believe there's dragons on that path. I really do. I think there's dragons down that path of not trusting and not respecting and not loving. And those dragons bite back. They bite back with stress-related illnesses. They bite back with depression. They bite back with anger. They bite with frustration and disappointment and feelings of betrayal. They bite with all kinds of things that keep me from living a joyful life. And I don't like that. So my choice then becomes, okay, love unconditionally and try and develop some trust and respect within the areas as much as you can. Otherwise, you got dragons. And I mean, as much as I like dragons, I'm known for donning a dragon costume once in a while and going outside to play and showing up at parties with it on. As much as I like dragons, there's good dragons, and then there's ones that bite back. But I need to look at this stuff. And I need to, and this is another invitation for you, revise or renew or even create a definition of what love looks like for me. Because if love is the way, if love is an aspect of God and I'm made in the image and likeness of God, I need to be love simply because that is a part of who and what I am. It's who we are called to be. Even if I don't totally understand what that might look like for me. Maybe it looks like just finding one thing that I could trust and respect about every human being on the planet. Just one little aspect, one thing about that person that I can love. And for me, that looks like trying to find common ground. And I've been able to find some common ground. I've set a commitment. I made a goal to find common ground with some of these people. And I've been able to find that. And maybe that's what loving thy neighbor looks like. Obviously, I don't have a lot of answers for you. I'm throwing out questions, throwing out things for you to contemplate, because loving thy neighbor is difficult. And it's different for all of us. All I know for me is that I need to be love. Period. End of story. So because this is a unity church, I always like to go and read some of Charles Fillmore work and see what he has to say about things. And so I have his book called The 12 Powers of Man. And of course, one of those powers is love. And I found this quote. He feels pretty strongly about this stuff. He said, without love, we should lose contact with our Mother Earth, and losing that, we should fly off into space and be lost in the stardust of unborn worlds. He feels pretty strongly about love. He feels really strongly about that. And I do too. Because how many times have we heard how powerful love is? I mean, even the Bible says love has the power to overcome every single difficulty we have in our life. Every single one. That's power, guys. That's true, awesome, incredible power. Now imagine if we can show up being love in the world, then we have that power. And if we can show up being love in the world and have that power, then we can use that power for good and change the world one human being at a time. We can do that if we can be that. That's why I think it's really good to look at love as something we be rather than something we do. We just be it. Back to Bell Hooks in her book called All About Love, she says love must contain also elements of willingness to nurture our own and others' spiritual growth. So you guys are all here today. You're nurturing your own spiritual growth. I happen to know that there's some folks here today that are going to a fundraiser for Maui later on this afternoon. That's nurturing spiritual growth. I happen to know that there's people here today that are going to go, and there's people here that are going to go do a massage. That's nurturing spiritual growth. All of it's nurturing spiritual growth. The music that you give us is nurturing spiritual growth. We all have ways of nurturing spiritual growth. So we go out into the world and we do that. Bell Hooks also says we cannot claim to love if we are hurtful and abusive. Love and abuse cannot coexist. So I've been on a mission lately to not say bad things about people I disagree with. I don't practice sarcasm. I don't post sarcastic memes on my social media, although I see them and I enjoy them thoroughly. I'm not perfect, but I don't post them and I don't spread them. I don't call people names. I don't do any of that. That for me is part of what being love looks like. Because love is an action rather than a feeling when we be love. Hooks also says in her book that part of the action of being love is that we have accountability and responsibility. And for me, that's personal accountability and personal responsibility. I can't be loving if I'm blaming anything for anything. And yes, I did mean to say it that way. If I am blaming anything for anything, where's the love in that? It's not there. Blame removes all the love from the equation. I don't like finding fault. It's no one's fault. I think fault finding is a barrier to love. And I see things happen in the world and all the people who are in charge of these things. Well, what happened? Whose fault is it? And I'm like, dudes, can we get in the solution here? Really? We don't need to find fault. We just need to move forward from this. There's no fault. There's no fault. When I take personal accountability and responsibility, it means I cease being a victim. And that feels really good. And when I do that, I can be love. So the other gift that I think comes with being love is that being love is an openness. And when we be love and we're open, we start to feel or discover or download or think of creative solutions to the problems in our lives, which is really cool. Really, really cool. So we might have a problem or something that we would like to change in our life. And we've been trying everything we know to change it, and nothing's been working. What then? What then? If we're open and if we be love, different kinds of creative solutions might flow in there. And we can go, wow, I never thought of that. I never thought of that. And as an example, this community of unity, you guys are in the midst of great change. Start with being love. Start with being open. And I know you're already doing this because Carol told me so, but asking the questions, what are my strengths? How can I show up here differently? But maybe start asking, is there anything else to be known at this time? And see what comes up. Is there anything else to be known at this time? What's going on here? That's the kind of beautiful stuff that happens when we be love. And of course, Albert Einstein, he said, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking that created them. So we got to have new thoughts. And what is unity but a new thought church? We got to have new thoughts. If we are to be love, that's calling us to think differently. And of course, that takes some persistence. It doesn't come automatically. This is all tall order stuff. It's really tall order stuff. But guess what? We have support groups. We have prayer chaplains. I bet you one of these prayer chaplains here would love to talk with you about what it would be like to be love. We have community. I have prayer partners. There's all kinds of help available to us when we want to be love. Because I think that's our calling. That's our invitation. That's what is up for us here today, is to love our neighbor by being love first. If we could just imagine what this world would be like if we showed up, all of us, every single one of us, as being love, what would that look like? What would that look like in the world? I get some pretty amazing stuff that I think about when I think about stuff like that. So I'm seeing evidence that there are more and more people in the world starting to show up being love. There's a couple new groups that I've become aware of. One of them is in Carson City. It's called L3, Listening, Learning, and Loving. And they're just going to get together once a month and talk about how to be more loving and open. They have no other agenda other than that. I think that's pretty cool. Carson City's almost an hour drive for me, but I'm going to make every attempt to go there. In fact, I've bribed myself. So I've made arrangements to meet a friend there. So I'll show up. Because when it gets right down to it, when it comes time to hopping in my car and driving an hour to go to Carson City, I'm like, nah, I'm going to stay home. Because I like where I live. I never want to leave. So this kind of stuff is happening in our world. This kind of stuff is happening. So loving thy neighbor begins with us. Has very little to do with the neighbor. It begins with us. And so that's my invitation to you, is to show up from this point forward, being love. And then watch and notice and see what kind of wonderful stuff comes up when you do that. I want to thank you all very, very much for having me here today. It's lovely to see all your faces, and I am complete.